And we are live on YouTube, and now I will let everybody in. Good evening, everyone. If you're just joining, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall, and we'll get started shortly. And I will make you a co-host, Matt. If you're just joining us, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Welcome, everybody. If you're just joining us, we'll be starting in just a moment. Give it just one more minute and we'll start up. If you're just joining us, this is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall, and we'll get started in just a moment. Hey, Pat. All right, well, let's begin.
Hello.
Good evening. Hello, Pat. Good evening, everybody. This is the Renters Alliance, Renter Town Hall. My name is Matt Losak. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Renters Alliance. We are the first and only regional nonprofit dedicated exclusively to renter outreach, education, organizing, and advocacy. With me tonight is our staff, Malek Demir, Tim Wong, Emily Towie, and David Mullins, and Pat Beckham. Our treasurer of our board, Josh Fisher, and our special guest, Matt Hill from the Public Justice Center. Couple of things. If you're joining us tonight as an attendee and you have a question or concern, please put it in the chat. We are recording live on YouTube, so if you missed something, you can watch it again on YouTube. We're going to spend our evening focusing on Annapolis. A lot of people don't realize this, but not all legislation can be passed at the local level that protects renters. Some legislation can be passed at the local level, some cannot be. Some has to go through the state legislature. The Maryland State Legislature begins its session in mid-January and goes through April. It's a short window, and there's a lot of legislation to be considered. And I can tell you historically that renters' rights and renter protections have not been a top priority in Maryland for a long time. And about, I guess, 10 or 15 years ago, we started looking into working with allies who have been trying to get some legislation passed and figuring out ways to do that collectively so that we can have more influence and also share our expertise on what it is that needs to happen to protect renters' homes from being unstable or from abuse of people's rights. We have made some progress in that time, but progress is slow, especially for those.
Matt? Oh, we'll give Matt a second here to unfreeze. Let's see. Okay, well, I can. Yeah, it looks like Matt is a bit frozen for the moment here. But to pick up where he left off, progress has indeed been slow on some of these things. And I know, hang on, bud. But I think we were going to start probably today with recapping some of the progress that we have made on some of these things, which has been a long way considering, as Matt said, that this wasn't a priority, for a long time. Matt, did you want to maybe at the top here, first of all, I just talk about some of what you see as some of those victories, that kind of slow fought progress that he was talking about, just to kind of kick us off here?
Yeah, happy to. So again, my name is Matt Hill. I'm an attorney at the Public Justice Center. Public Justice Center, I'll put our website in the chat here. It's a civil legal advocacy and civil legal services organization. We work on issues of housing justice, workplace justice, health equity and access, racial equity, and a number of other issues focused almost exclusively on Maryland. And we really appreciate the Renters Alliance. We've been partners on a number of different initiatives over the years, and have built a good relationship, and always value your strength in organizing and your ability to bring those perspectives to the table, because like Matt was saying, nobody else really is, right? So there are very few folks that are doing this, and we really appreciate your work and our continued partnership. And that partnership is in large part through, this statewide group that I'll also put in the chat. Renters United Maryland is kind of the group of allies who are working on these issues together. So to David's point, a lot of Oh, there we
Well, I
go.
think we got Matt
The
back
better
here.
Matt is back.
One second.
Sorry about that.
There's
Computer
the
got
sound again.
funny on me all of a sudden. I'm not sure where we left off, but I'm sure it was good.
Well, it had been that that progress was a little slow on some of these victories, and so Matt was able to just introduce who he is and say a little bit about the Public Justice Center. But I didn't know if you wanted to lay any more groundwork before he goes.
Only to say we've come a long way, and that we have some obstacles and some challenges that we'll discuss this evening. We also have some opportunities, change of players in Annapolis, which we'll discuss as well, and some bills that we're trying to push forward in the coming session that Matt will be able to discuss as well. But Matt, please continue. Sorry for the interruption. We live in Zoom world.
No problem. You also missed me giving glowing remarks about the Renters Alliance and you and all the good work y'all have done. And no, it's been a very good partnership, and we really bring a lot to the table from our respective organizations, and absolutely. So to your point about why city versus state or county versus state. You can do a lot at the county level, and y'all have. I mean, the Montgomery County leads the way in things like rent control, in utility regulation. You have an office, a tenant ombudsman's office, and I know that these things are problematic on various levels. But compared to the rest of Maryland, you've made a lot of progress, and that's exciting. And we look at Montgomery County like, oh, why can't we do the way Montgomery County does it? And part of the problem with our city-state setup, or excuse me, our state-county setup, is that whenever you want to change court processes, you kind of have to go through the state level. So if you don't like how evictions are done, you can't really do that at the county level. You got to go through the state level. If you want state money or a new program, you got to go through the state level. And so that's why a lot of tenants' rights are really wrapped up only in state legislation. You can't do them at the county level. So some examples of progress that we've worked together on the past successfully. We passed in 2020 the Home Act, or the Home Act before the Home Act, as it's probably known down here. This is the source of income discrimination law. So adding source of income to Maryland's fair housing law. So landlords can't discriminate against someone based on race, gender, family size, sexual orientation, and now source of income. This primarily protects folks who have vouchers are the biggest beneficiaries of this law. So making sure that folks with vouchers are treated the same as any other tenant. And so that was a pretty big win. I think Maryland was only the 10th state in the country to pass a law like that. Montgomery County had it first, so you were a great role model. But passing it at the state level also brings new, what we call causes of action, and ability to enforce that law. A lot of enforcement still left to be done there, but it's an important step. A few other things that we've worked on and successfully is, giving somebody a notice before the landlord files for a rent-based eviction. So it seems like a simple thing, right? The landlord should tell you, hey, if you don't pay this amount within 10 days, I'm going to start an eviction process. Well, until 2021, Maryland was one of the only states in the country that didn't have some sort of notice. And it's important, right? Why should somebody have to go through an eviction case? Why should somebody have an eviction complaint filed against them on a public record without first having a chance to either pay it, dispute it, or try to work it out with the landlord before they file for an eviction? And again, sounds so simple, but you all, I don't know if folks understand the power of the landlord interest in Annapolis, through their money, through their organization. Frankly, a lot of legislators are also landlords. And so we're up against tremendous obstacles here. And it's the power of organized people with organized ideas that is what we have. And so that is a win. Another win is right to counsel in eviction cases. So making sure that everyone should have access to an attorney if you're going to go up against the landlord in court. And that's still a work in progress too, right? I know y'all know there are implementation issues, but we got the law passed. We got some money to fund it. It also funds outreach and education, which is super important. And glad to have the Renters Alliance as a partner in that. And I think we've been able to help thousands and thousands of families. I don't have the stat offhand. I think it's going to be published later this year about how many families have been helped through right to counsel and prevented evictions, or had the rent reduced, or gotten, conditions in the building fixed. So that's really exciting. Just recently, last year, worked on a bill about making sure that if a landlord has to be licensed or have a lead certificate, then they should have a license or a lead certificate before they can go to court for eviction, right? Again, it sounds simple and common sense to us, but you just, you have to, again, think about the odds that we're up against. And so passing this kind of important basic fairness law that also protects public health and safety, right? Because a landlord should pass an inspection to get a license. And if they can't pass inspection, they shouldn't get to go to court. And so that's another recent victory. And again, again, they don't. Sometimes I feel like, oh, this is so common sense. How come this wasn't the law before we got started? And it's because we're up against these kind of long odds. But let me now turn to the agenda for this year. And this is the Housing Justice 2024. And so through a process of renter surveys and discussions, we came to the conclusion that, here are some really important issues that are facing renters today. And this is based on, again, surveys of renters throughout the state, meetings, a summit, where folks kind of said, okay, here's what we're going to prioritize, are things that we think we can make a meaningful impact with and get passed throughout the state. So I know y'all know this because the Renters Alliance has been a huge proponent of just cause eviction for years. And we're making progress. Again, it is slow, but Janelle Wilkins, Delegate Wilkins, is a huge supporter of this. She's going to sponsor this again in the House. The former House Chair, Kumar Barve, hated this bill. He hated this bill. I'm going into politics, but let me step back. Just cause eviction, what does that mean? It means that before a landlord can non-renew your lease, they have to have a good reason, right? You can't just arbitrarily non-renew somebody's lease, or what we see in a lot of cases is kind of this soft retaliation, like, hey, you complained too much about the leak in the roof. I just don't want to deal with you anymore. I'm going to non-renew your lease. That should be illegal, right? But right now, even if it is illegal in certain circumstances, it's not in other circumstances, and a tenant's got to prove this and that. Very challenging. Just cause makes it a lot easier. It says the landlord's got to prove that the tenant screwed up. They did something pretty bad, and that's why I'm not renewing your lease. And this isn't even a bill that's going to enact just cause statewide, right? Because that didn't seem to be moving very far. But this is going to give localities the ability to pass just cause legislation. And so I think that'll be really, hopefully important for Montgomery County, because I know Montgomery County's tried to do that before. Baltimore City's tried to do it. Other jurisdictions have looked into it, and it doesn't work because the state law right now says, no, Montgomery County, you can't pass just cause eviction legislation. We want to change that. We're one of the very few states that says localities can't pass just cause. We got to flip it and say localities can pass just cause and bring the state into line with most states throughout the country. This also helps support rent control, frankly, because one thing we'll see landlords try to do is to let's say I want to raise the rent more than rent control allows me to do. And so to get around that, I'll just non-renew the tenant's lease and then pass on a rent increase to the next guy, right? Now they're not supposed to do that. That's illegal in Montgomery County, as I understand the rent control law. That's illegal, but it's who's monitoring that? Who's keeping track of exactly what the rent was and what unit before somebody vacated? I mean, it's very challenging. So just cause says to the landlord, no, you can't just non-renew. You got to have a good reason to try to get around it. You can't get around the rent control laws. Tenant Safety Act. We know that in Montgomery County and other jurisdictions throughout the state, landlords need to be held accountable, right? If they're not fixing severe conditions of disrepair, then someone has to hold them accountable. So the idea is this is the former Tenant Justice Act, now renamed Safety Act, because it's focused on safety and making sure that they're taking out some of the artificial obstacles to tenants being able to file what's called a rent escrow, and then making sure that landlords are accountable in that process and accountable by having to pay significant penalties, attorneys' fees, which will help people get access to attorneys because attorneys are more likely to take your case if they can get fees from the landlord at the end. So things of that nature, really important. And so that's another bill. I should back up on the politics of these. So local, where'd it go? Just Cause, enabling legislation for Just Cause, that's sponsored by Delegate Wilkins. Again, made big supporter, and then Senator Anthony Muse from Prince George's County is very exciting. The Tenant Safety Act. This is Delegate Vaughn Stewart, another real champion. This bill passed the House last year. It died in the Senate. And so again, we've made real progress here, and now we just got to get it through the Senate. And I think we've got a Senate sponsor from Montgomery County, in fact. I can't name them because I'm still working to confirm that for sure. But really excited to have a sponsor there in the Senate who's going to fight for this from Montgomery County and hopefully get it over the hump this year. Eviction prevention funding. I'm pretty sure Montgomery County has run out along with most jurisdictions in the state. Is that right? Or you have local dollars now instead of the federal dollars. Is that the way it works?
I'm not exactly sure. In fact, it's an answer we've been pursuing at every meeting, I think every week. But there was some money floating around, and I believe Secretary Day said that there was some money still floating around at the state level. Not exactly sure, but suffice it to say that there's not sufficient funds available to help people who are still impacted by COVID and other circumstances beyond their control to pay their rent and stay housed.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we know that this works, right? Because folks, especially when, in a place of rising rent inflation, right? When rents are going up 20, 30%, it pushes people closer to the edge. And then any sort of financial hiccup, right? You miss hours because you got sick. You had a funeral expense to pay for. A hospital bill came due, and it was either pay the hospital bill or watch your car get repossessed. That pushes folks over the edge. And so this eviction prevention funding says, okay, the state's going to help you with those 2 or 3 months of rent that you need to get over that hump. And so it was so helpful and so effective during COVID. I mean, we cut evictions in the state in half through eviction prevention funding and right to counsel. But because of, the uncertain economic times, the rent inflation, and we found that evictions are basically back up to where they were pre-pandemic. And that's because, in part, we've run out of eviction prevention funding that the feds were giving to the state. And so what we've said to the state is, look, this is about, preventing homelessness, right? This is about keeping kids in school, because if you're evicted as a family, you're likely going to have to move to a different school district. And then suddenly the state is paying for your children's bus or their Uber or their taxi or whatever it has to be to get back to the old school, or you're having to start all over again in a new school. And that really affects children's education. There's a lot of studies to that effect. It's a race equity issue, right? This stat was really stunning to me, that about a quarter of Black children under 5 in rental housing will live in a household facing an eviction filing in the United States. 25% of Black children face an eviction filing each year in the United States. That's insane. Why don't we have the funding to make sure that doesn't happen? We're going to have a study released no longer in November, hopefully in December, that will document some of these issues and also talk about how an ounce of prevention is much more important than it saves you a lot of money downstream. I got to remember what the rest of that saying is.
Matt, if I may underscore that a little bit, so important what you're saying, that we often talk about, and legislators will push back this way. They'll say this bill is going to cost this much to implement, but the next question has to be asked: what will it cost us if we don't implement it? What profit can we get by investing? What do we lose by failing to invest? And of course, the disproportionate impact on people of color, but low-income families across the board, anybody, in fact. And the other part that needs to be emphasized for politics of it to keep in mind is that we have an increasing number of seniors who are living in the state, coming from within and moving into rental housing from out of state and out of our counties, who are seeing an increasing amount of their income, whatever level of the economic spectrum they're on, go to housing, to the point where they are looking at unstable housing. And that safety net cost of seeing these people with health problems, being forced into the safety net, whether it be homeless shelters or emergency medical facilities or what have you, is actually a financial cost. So if you don't care about people and you think that, and you don't have a heart, at least keep in mind that we're going to pay for this one way or the other if we don't invest now.
Yep, absolutely true. And there are just so many studies that are documenting this, and this study will kind of bring those observations home to Maryland. And so there'll be some legislation to focus some of this funding on families with kids in school in particular. But then we're also looking to just get more funding for the general population when you're facing this sort of this situation and you need the eviction prevention funding assistance. Last priority is going to be the Tenant Property Rights Act, which I think we're renaming the Tenant Possessions Recovery Act. So most folks don't know this, but Maryland is out of line with 46 other states that provide tenants some ability to recover their belongings after an eviction, right? So you've already been evicted from your house. Should you have to lose every belonging that you own through that eviction? The answer in 46 other states is no. But in Maryland, it's yes. And the customs vary by local jurisdiction, so I'm not sure exactly how things work in Montgomery County, but I'm pretty sure that the belongings are taken out of the premises, right, and they're put somewhere.
On the street.
On the street. Okay, in some places it's on the street. In Montgomery County, it's the street. That might as well be just taking away your belongings, right? Because folks are just going to pillage those belongings as quickly as possible, or the weather is just going to destroy them. So this would give tenants a limited opportunity after an eviction to get their most valuable belongings out of the property: birth certificates, medications, family photos. We're looking at 10 days is what we're saying right now. And again, this is pretty basic, but because the landlord interest is so strong in Maryland, it has not happened. And so we're excited to bring this one. Those are the 4 priorities. Real quick, one piece of legislation to look out for. So the governor's going to have his own housing package that you're going to hear about pretty soon. That housing package does not include any of the Renters United Maryland priorities, unfortunately. So there are some really good things in the housing package, I understand. And so we're hoping to partner with the governor around those. But there may be another element to the housing package about raising filing fees in eviction cases. And if that's the case, the problem is when you raise a filing fee in an eviction case, landlords often pass that fee on to tenants. And oftentimes tenants will have to pay that increased fee in order to avoid the eviction. So you just have to be very careful in doing that kind of legislation that you don't let the court or the landlord pass that fee on to tenants. And so we hope and we pray that the governor understands that. We communicated that to him, but that'll be something to really watch because if that fee gets passed on to tenants, it's really saying to tenants, okay, now you have to pay more to avoid an eviction, and that's a problem. All right, I will stop talking in a second. One last thing though, and then I would love to take questions. I mean, so this doesn't happen without you all, right? You're the ones who legislators care about. I can look at the other 46 states and say, here's the way they do it over here in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, and isn't this a great idea? But they don't have to listen to me because who am I, right? They do have to listen to you because you're constituents. You're the constituents, right? You're the folks who put them into office, and they care about your opinions. They care about your calls. They care about your emails. They care about your likes on Instagram or on Twitter, if anybody's left on Twitter, or Threads, right? We're going to start moving into Threads now, I think. They care about that. I've seen that kind of advocacy, just a simple click, actually change the course of committee votes midstream. So please stay engaged. We partner with Matt Losack, with David, sending updates, collaborating. And so there'll be lots of opportunities for folks to get involved and make your views known to your legislators. And so we hope folks will do that.
Thanks, Matt. if you would send us a copy of this PowerPoint so we can put that out in tomorrow's newsletter. Let's talk a little bit more about the politics of Annapolis and what we're facing. You mentioned earlier, unfortunately, the Republican Party has generally opposed much of the renter protections that have been put forward. And unfortunately, to our surprise, many Democrats themselves also oppose a lot of this legislation, in part because some are landlords, and in part because, as I say, it's nobody's fault, I suppose, but the organized renter voice didn't really appear on the scene until about 15 years ago. Maryland was a rural state, house and garden, with the exception of Baltimore City. Washington, D.C. was the city, Philadelphia, New York, but Maryland was a rural state. And its legal infrastructure protecting renters is almost non-existent. And so it wasn't until really the last 20 years or so when the population of renters in Maryland started to change dramatically. In 2007, we were about 23% renter. Now we're approaching 40% renter. And of course, that is much higher in areas concentrated with renters like Silver Spring, Bethesda, Rockville, Baltimore City, Prince George's County. And that trajectory continues not only in Maryland, but across the country, because buying a house has become increasingly out of reach for working class people. And for that matter, even upper class folks who are trying to downsize, particularly seniors, and moving into rental housing for the convenience to be near shopping and medical facilities and transportation, but finding out to their surprise and to their peril that there are very few renter protections to protect their homes. And so correlating with that rise of renters is also a rise in organized renter voices and thinking about how to protect renters from fundamentals that Matt Hill just outlined. How could they take you to court the next day to evict you from your home without giving you any preparation, any warning? So, 10 days notice, geez, it seems only fair. Matt, what is the statistic of tenants who come to court without a lawyer?
Before we passed the Access to Counsel and Evictions law, it was something like 95% of tenants came to court without a lawyer. And I think, they've just started measuring this and studying it. And so hopefully we'll have an update by the end of the year exactly what progress we've made. Because we know progress has been made, but we also know that not everyone has access to an attorney yet.
Right. And unfortunately, the Access to Counsel in evictions is targeting only folks who are at 50% or lower of area median income. So it's only low income folks, when there's a large margin of folks just over that line who also could use an attorney. But the point is that the balance of power in favor of the landlords and the landlord industry has been grotesque. And that coming to court without a lawyer, facing a landlord and a legal firm representing that landlord, makes it very difficult to understand the technicalities and the justice that one can avail that you won't know unless you are a lawyer or be represented by a lawyer. So extremely important, and we have a long way to go there. I want to say something about just cause. As Matt Hill said, we've been fighting for this for a long time. It's a common sense thing. It's a common fairness thing. But we think that a home is not the same thing as beer and cigarettes or fancy pocketbooks and sneakers, that it's not a common commodity, that actually, because it's so important to community health, welfare, and prosperity, and public safety, frankly, that it has to also be considered as part of public policy, that there has to be more than just, if you don't like it, move out, or if you can't afford it, goodbye. The Renters Alliance has always taken the position that a landlord has the right to maintain his or her profit margin and to keep up with legitimately related expenses, provided, again, as Matt Hill points out, that they obey the rules and maintain their properties and obey the requirements of their license. But we don't believe in profit gouging. We don't believe that a landlord should have the ability to throw somebody out of their home without a good reason. So, put on your Judge Judy hat if you're not a lawyer and you watch Judge Judy, what is a good reason to actually force somebody out of their home? We insist, we demand that a landlord should have that reason stated before they can fail to renew somebody's lease. If they're going to let an apartment in perpetuity, as most apartments are in the state of Maryland, they're corporate landlords, but even if they were small landlords, and you intend to make a home permanently for people, then in order to evict somebody, you should have a good reason to do so. We understand that, unfortunately, for some people, they do have to be evicted. We have occasionally had to side with tenants against other tenants. We have occasionally had to side, or at least understand, when a landlord is trying to protect their community from someone who is causing such difficulties to put other residents at risk. But all of those reasons should be statable reasons that any judge in court would agree with. But right now, they don't have to say anything at all. They simply give you 60 days notice and say they're not renewing your lease. Imagine what that means to somebody who's lived in their home for 10, 20 years, or has children in schools, or is disabled, or is, for some reason vulnerable. The instability that causes and the ability to intimidate tenants, whole communities of tenants, which we have seen, who are afraid to speak up because they're afraid they're going to lose their homes, is a terrible prospect. It is real camouflage for all types of abuse of tenants, from racial discrimination to targeting people who speak up for promised or required services. So we cannot understate how important this basic legislation is, and how we will certainly fight for it. Comments from folks? We would like you all to put your questions or concerns in the chat so we can get to
Yeah,
them.
can I ask Matt Hill for a little clarification about the last part of his slide, fairness? Is that 10 days that the renter would get? It says after eviction. Are you talking about after they leave court, they get 10 days? Certainly not after their things are put on the street. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I'm just trying to clarify how the 10 days would fit into the process.
Right.
When would the renters, be able to use that 10 days?
Yeah, exactly. So it would be at the the very end. So in other words, right now, as Matt was saying, and it varies by county, but in Montgomery County, you put the possessions on the street, right? Now, if we pass this bill, the landlord's going to have to keep those possessions either in the property, so on the premises, or move them into some sort of self-storage if they want to. And then the tenant has 10 days to retrieve those belongings if they want to. So it's a way to give tenants just a fair opportunity to get those belongings back if they want them. Again, they do this in 46 other states. We can do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. They also do it in DC, I believe, Matt. Is that right?
I think, yeah, sounds right.
Yeah. And we have seen horror shows of, when people are facing eviction, it's there's the Norman Rockwell version, which is baloney, that somehow people are properly warned and they, refuse to do it. And so now they have their stuff put on the street. It's usually not that way. People are struggling. People are facing personal crises. People are distracted. People, when you're under that kind of stress, some people start to fantasize that it's not going to happen and that maybe they can just one more day. Maybe they are desperately seeking assistance from county or state resources or private resources and been promised that they're going to get resources, but the resources don't arrive in time. And then suddenly sheriff and landlord and movers come and it's over. And we have seen, families with children sitting on their chairs on the lawn with utterly bewildered, shell-shocked, and not knowing what to do. So just knowing human nature and people who are in difficult, vulnerable straits, to understand how important just a few days time to get themselves together will be for many people. Of course, we are working to try to prevent the eviction in the first place, but any way we can lighten the damage is going to be very important. Also, we should point out that in Montgomery County, for those who are facing imminent eviction, there are resources available for tenants if they seek assistance and staff. And we could put that contact information for Health and Human Services to end and prevent homelessness in the chat. But there are funds available for putting belongings in storage and for possibly helping people find alternative housing before an eviction takes place. So keep that in mind. Also, our staff do go door to door to hit people who are, put information on their doors who are facing imminent eviction, who are on the writ of restitution list in Montgomery County, which we receive. So take advantage of that. And if you feel that you are facing eviction for any reason, but especially if you feel that it's unfairly, please reach out to us. We will do what we can at our level. And if we feel that our counseling is not going to be sufficient and you need legal assistance, we know how to get that for you and we'll direct you where you need to go. Other questions and concerns from everybody on the panel and from the audience?
There was a question about whether there was any legislation coming up for disabled residents.
For what now, Tim?
Disabled residents.
Oh, disabled residents. Matt?
I don't know. I've heard some talk about it, but and certainly it's something that we need to work on further. But there's nothing specific that I'm aware of at the moment.
I know that you mentioned something about getting emergency resources for families with children. And I think I added to that thinking about seniors and others, but it might be something to consider in that package as we look at amendments to such legislation, that we're talking about vulnerable populations and defining vulnerability as broadly as we can. Because again, I think, seniors are for real. And also with an eye toward being politically shrewd, seniors vote like crazy and elected officials know that. And having a senior population better protected, I think will add strength to the campaign to support such legislation. And of course, the disabled community is also very active. If there's a way to add some protections there, I think that might strengthen our ability to get such legislation passed. The Tenant Safety Act, Vaughn Stewart, who's on the board of the Renters Alliance and has been a champion for renters' rights since his property manager stood in front of the doorway to prevent him from leading a tenants association meeting at his building before he became a state delegate and one of our board members. It just, unfortunately for that property manager, when she stood in front of the doorway and called the police, our invited guests for the Tenants Association meeting were soon-to-be Congressman Jamie Raskin and soon-to-be County Executive Mark Elrich and some of the state delegates. So it was a mistake, to say the least. But then he joined our board. But the Tenant Safety Act, I think there's a principle here, Matt, which maybe you can describe about collective action versus individual action in court and standing.
Sure. So one of the aspects of the Tenant Safety Act, to your point, Matt, is making sure that renters can join together. So if you live in the same building or the same apartment complex, and you're dealing with some of the same issues, like let's say it's a problem with the heat or a rodent infestation, one of the things the Tenant Safety Act will clarify is that those tenants should be able to come together and file for what's called rent escrow. And to go into rent escrow a little bit, it just means that you put your rent into escrow with the court until the landlord makes the repairs. And you can get an abatement of the rent, so the court can reduce your rent and should reduce your rent that's one of the things we want to make clear with the Tenant Safety Act. If you qualify for an escrow, they've got severe conditions, you've given the landlord notice, they've refused to fix the problem after a reasonable time, you shouldn't have to pay full rent for that property. Neither should your neighbors. You all should be able to come together and file against that landlord together and bring your collective voice to the table. And it also helps you, right? Because a lot of times if it's just one individual versus a landlord, the individual will say, well, I told you about the heat and you didn't do anything. And the landlord will say, well, I had no idea. What are you talking about? Oh, this is news to me. But if you got 5 people in front of the judge saying the exact same thing, the landlord's going to have a lot harder time saying, oh, I had no idea, right? And so it's really going to be a way to leverage collective action from multiple tenants in the same building or the same complex dealing with the same issues, and make sure that people get a reduction on that rent, because you shouldn't have to pay the full freight when you're not getting what you paid for.
Right. Maybe you said this, Matt, and I got distracted, but in the old way, it was that every complaint, every filing had to be done individually. So that if 2 people had the same complaint, they both had to file individually. But now if they had a tenants association, which could act like a union, so that you actually have the legal standing of an organization that could be represented as an organization. Is that part of this?
Well, so yeah, in prior years, it was allowing a tenants association to have standing to bring the complaint. Unfortunately, we got a lot of pushback about that aspect from different sources, and those sources held a lot of sway with our legislative friends, and so they basically said, "Look, that's a non-starter. Y'all, we gotta change that." So unfortunately, we do have to change it, but at the same time, I think we can still accomplish that same goal by, the tenants, say the Renters Alliance helps organize in a building, helps tenants come together, file the complaint. It's the tenant's complaint, but it's the Renters Alliance that is helping them to leverage their collective action.
Oh, that'll work. That's okay. Again, for those who haven't been to court, I mean, my joke is it takes me 2 aspirin and a glass of good bourbon that Matt Hill likes to drink, that to call the cable company. I mean, I have a graduate degree. It is overwhelming to deal with some of this bureaucracy. Court is extremely intimidating for a lot of people. It's complicated and it's overwhelming. When you force tenants, most tenants who are working folks trying to keep down a job or 2, and then force them to have to file in court, pay a fee to file in court, in order to get, and have to wait weeks or months to have their day in court, not to know how the court system works or how to represent themselves without a lawyer in court, or they have to get a lawyer, which could cost, $200-300 an hour or more. To get a lawyer to represent. It is an overwhelming process. And so acting collectively with several tenants to solve a building-wide problem is a much needed reform. What else do we have, folks?
I just want to highlight in the chat what Miss Harris shared, or Mr. Harris, I don't know, about, being given non-renewal notices after trying to organize. And that's exactly what Just Cause would prevent, right? We pass Just Cause, the landlord's not going to be able to non-renew because you tried to form a tenants union. And in some ways, that should already be the law, right? And in some cases, we can try to protect against retaliation, but it's just very challenging. And so Just Cause would make it much easier to protect folks and assert the rights.
Well, it's so common sense.
Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
I was just saying it's so common sense that it is the law at the buildings that receive a subsidy, right? I mean, the low-income housing tax credit buildings have that written into the tax code that the people that live there do have it. It's just it's an obvious thing for them, and so yeah, we would hope to extend it. Did you kind of stepped into the politics for a minute earlier on this? But there, if my understanding, there's the barrier to Just Cause the specific person that was a barrier is, there's a bit of a change there. I didn't know if you wanted to. I don't want to jinx anything, but there was like a glimmer of hope if my understanding is correct on that.
Matt, if you don't want to dive in, I'm more than willing. Just let me know.
This is probably one of your favorite topics, Matt, but let me just say this. I mean, so not dwelling in the past. Maybe we could. It's fun to dwell in the past sometimes. But looking to this year, right, there are two key Montgomery County legislators who are in some ways going to make or break this bill. And that is Chair Mark Corman in House Environment and Transportation, who's a friend of this issue. He's told us, he supports Just Cause. There's Senator Will Smith, who is the chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. The chairs of committees that these bills go to have tremendous power. And so really everyone reaching out and being very positive with Chair Corman and Chair Smith and saying, this is a really important bill to us. We really hope you're going to prioritize this. We know there are a lot of important things out there, but housing stability is so key to all aspects of our lives, whether it's education or economics or healthcare. Just Cause is super important.
Let me, by the way, the previous chair was Kumar Barba. He's a friend of mine on every topic except this one. And he has moved on. He's no longer in the delegation and has gotten some kind of appointment in the utility billing world, I think. Let's talk about the objections to Just Cause, Matt, just so that people understand what the opposition says. I think that landlords will say, the landlord lobby says that the eviction process is too lengthy and they want the ability to decide who a problem tenant is. We, on the other hand, believe that losing one's home is a serious matter, and that like all serious matters, whether they be a criminal matter or a civil lawsuit of some sort, all require due process, some kind of way to say, is this arbitrary? Is this, covering up for some nefarious activity like racial discrimination or forming a tenants association? What are some of the other arguments against, Matt, that we've heard that people need to prepare arguments against?
Yeah, so one is that this is equivalent of what they'd like to derisively call a lease for life. That you have a lease for the rest of your life. Just not true. I mean, you have a 1-year lease in most cases, maybe 2 years, and it's up for renewal. And the landlord can change the rules some. They can increase the rent as long as it's within the legal limitations. And it's not a lease for life. The parties can choose to non-renew the lease, but landlords can't just do that arbitrarily, right? They can't, as Matt Losek, you were just saying, do that for some sort of hidden nefarious motive, or because they don't like the fact that somebody complained about the leak in the roof. They should have to have a reason. And so, as you were saying, David, too, I mean, here's the big hidden secret. We have 60,000 units of housing in the state of Maryland owned overwhelmingly by nonprofits and for-profit companies that all have Just Cause already in their leases. And this is high quality housing in most cases. And it's very functional and it works to meet people's needs. It's called housing financed by the federal low income housing tax credit. It's privately owned. It gets some public money. They all have Just Cause in their leases. Guess what? That housing is no better or worse than any other housing throughout the state. So this is not a lease for life. This is not going to bring the sky is not going to fall on the rental housing industry. You have these laws in Washington State, California, New Jersey, New Hampshire, tons of localities, DC, Philadelphia, Chicago, many jurisdictions, especially localities, have these laws. The housing market is not impacted. It does provide tenants a lot more stability and assurance that they can organize and they can complain without that fear of retaliation. So, we have to push back on that.
A couple other arguments that come up is the one that landlords believe in sort of this old-fashioned view of what a landlord's power should be, that they should be able to contract or lease to any terms they want, any way they want. This is not true of any contract, and Matt Hill's a lawyer. He can add to that with greater expertise, but contracts are not in a vacuum. There are laws regarding contracting. You can't contract to be a slave anymore. So there are certain rules about contracts that you just can't put in a contract. And so the idea that we can't codify rules about what contracts can do, what leases can do, and what they can't do, it's just simply not true. But landlords will argue it's their private property rights to decide any terms of somebody living on their property they want. And that's actually never been true, and at least not in the modern era. And we just want to modify that to say, if you're going to create a business that establishes people's homes, not just selling them, a pair of sneakers, you want them or you don't want them, but people's homes, that there's a community compelling interest in assuring that those homes are stable and of quality and within code. So private property rights, I want to do whatever I want. We say you can make some money, you can do, have management prerogatives, but they are not carte blanche. There has to be a balance somehow in that. But that's a popular one with the landlords. And the other one was the problem tenant that they are afraid to evict because they're so dangerous or so problematic. The what we hear, Matt, which I love, is the motorcycle gang that lives in the apartment building. They're always referring to them somehow, and they don't want to give them an eviction notice because the property manager is afraid to do it, as if somehow giving them a tenant holding over notice wouldn't be sufficient to cause the same intimidation. So I'm not sure where that comes from, but they want a streamlined process to evict people, and they will present it as though they're doing it in the best interest of the community, but really it's just a camouflage for targeting people that are seeking promised or required services, or to avoid having to repair or maintain their building that they're supposed to take care of, or racial or discrimination, some kind of discrimination, or some other nefarious activity. Landlords can evict tenants for good cause under this bill. And also the life estate thing that they raised, that this will be a life estate. It sounds scary that somehow they characterize a tenant as though they're your unwanted stepchild who's been flunked out of college and is now living in your living room and you're just trying to get rid of them. As if tenants don't have homes, that there aren't families, that there aren't individuals who are making a life in their homes. And we're saying that they should have a very good reason in order to force people out of their homes, and they should state that reason. Otherwise, they can certainly evict for reasons that any Judge Judy would say, hey, look, it's enough already, you've got to go. So those reasons are not in any way limited. But I've never understood, and I've joked about this and got pushback from one delegate in the last round when we gave testimony. And I said, as far as I know, every landlord would like to take rent for as long as you're alive and even after you're dead. And the one delegate got upset by that. But it's true. This is a business. And they would, any good landlord acting in good faith wants to collect rent from a stable tenant for as long as possible. So there's no reason why, if you're going to let your apartment, either a big corporation or an individual landlord, in perpetuity, why you wouldn't want stable tenants, unless you're trying to avoid your responsibilities or you're trying to target somebody unfairly. What else do we got, folks?
Matt, I really apologize. I'm getting called from on high to help out around the house, so I'm going to have to leave you. I really appreciate your time and everyone tonight.
Matt Hill, a leading housing lawyer with the Public Justice Center and a friend and ally of the Renters Alliance and of mine. We thank you very much. We hope to see you back again as we progress towards the legislative session. Keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much for your partnership. I look forward to continuing to work with all y'all. Take care.
Take care, Matt. A couple of announcements, if there are no questions coming in. First, everybody is on the call. Please come. You're welcome to our this Friday, that is day after tomorrow, 6:30 at 8601 Georgia Avenue to our 2023 Building Community Celebration, 6:30 to 8 o'clock. County Executive will be there, Jamie Raskin will be there, a whole bunch of your elected officials, as well as many of your neighbors and tenant leaders from across Montgomery County and beyond. And, you know, wine and cheese, soft drinks, food, and an opportunity for us to celebrate and honor those who helped advance rent stabilization in Montgomery County. Let's say a little bit about that just as a reminder for folks. The bill was passed, I believe, on July 18th, signed into law sometime after that. Forgot the exact date. If anybody knows, you can put it in the chat. But it is still not in full force yet. Once it required 90 days before it becomes law, first of all, from the day it was signed. Secondly, the bill requires that certain aspects of it be developed in regulation. The Department of Housing and Community Affairs is still working on those regulations, which then have to go before the council and be passed. So many people may have heard that there's a 6% rent cap. It has not taken effect yet. They may have heard that other aspects of the bill may be enforced. They're not yet. So please stay tuned to that. We are working with the Department of Housing and Community Affairs to find out where we are and take a look at these regulations and make sure that they in no way weaken the legislation. But let me also say, while we are pleased with the progress that the council has made towards advancing rent stabilization, in no way do we think this is mission accomplished. This bill has a 6% rent increase cap. For us, that's too much. So we understand that many people are still going to find it difficult to pay their rent, even with a 6% cap. It's better than a 7% increase, a 10%, a 20%. But for a lot of people, getting up above 2 or 3% is at risk of pricing them out of their homes. The bill also includes a 23-year exemption for new properties. So if your property was built 22 years ago and the bill came into effect today, they still have 1 more year of being exempt from this legislation. If your property was built this year, they have 23 years before this bill would be enforced at that property. We don't like that aspect of it. We think we agreed with the idea that a new investment, an investor should get back their investment. We agree that they should make a reasonable profit. We're not sure that 23 years makes any sense. It's probably more likely that a property, even a large one, would probably make their profit back in 10 years. But whatever the term is, it seems that 23 years was arbitrary. And we would have liked to have seen something that is a little bit more realistic, and that if the property could demonstrate that they made their profit and their money back, that they should no longer be protected by exempted from rent stabilization. Likewise, if after 10 years, say, which seems more reasonable, they could show that they still got a long way to go to make their money back, then there should be some flexibility in the legislation to allow for that. So in no way would the legislation interfere with anybody investing. Nobody should be afraid to invest in new housing. But 23 years seems like a long time for us, and we oppose that amendment. The other amendment that we bitterly opposed was an exemption for small landlords who have 2 units or less. There are tens of thousands of renters in Montgomery County who live in single-family homes, or people who own a single condominium or 2 condominiums. For the Renters Alliance, it is our belief that if you're a landlord and you rent a home, you have the same responsibilities as a large landlord. You still have the same rights as a large landlord and a small landlord. You have the right to get your rent. You have the right to see that your tenants protect the property reasonably, not do any damage beyond normal wear and tear, and so on. All of those prerogatives exist. But being exempted from providing stable, affordable, quality homes in law makes no sense to us. So this bill is not mission accomplished. However, again, we've done this for 15 years or so. When we started this, I'm not joking or exaggerating, but literally there are elected officials in this council, not this council, but in the Montgomery County Council, who laughed in our faces, saying these kinds of protections would never come to fruition in Montgomery County. So we have come a long way, and we need to acknowledge those who helped us get there, including our elected officials, our community leaders and organizational leaders that partner with us, individual tenants who stood up for their rights, all of you all who organize tenants and your apartment communities around Montgomery County. We think that we ought to take a little bit of time on Friday to party. So we hope that you join us. Could one of you guys put in the, if you don't have it, I'll do it, the link to Eventbrite to get tickets if you want to, and please share this link with your friends. David, did you want to say something about what we talked about?
The access to council and evictions program. Yeah, well, it came up earlier that something that we're really pleased passed at the state level was not only that those facing eviction tenants should have access to counsel, since most of the landlords are represented, but then finally supplementary funding was passed from the state to actually fund those lawyers. So now we have the ACE program for short, the Access to Counsel and Evictions program, that is up and running. And in Montgomery County, the legal service partners, the lawyers are coming from Legal Aid, from CASA, former CASA de Maryland, and then from the Homeless Persons Representation Project, HPRP for short. And there are lawyers now funded to be down there at Rent Court on Wednesdays and Fridays, I believe they're still doing it. But they're down there for same-day representation, which can be, extremely helpful, certainly. But they're also available to be contacted, beforehand and to consult with folks before their cases if you're facing eviction. And that's, again, as Matt laid out, how few tenants are normally represented. And if you go down there and see, you'll see that it really is just a handful of tenants who are going to be represented. And most of the ones I see when I go down now have found one of the CASA or legal aid lawyers that day. And those are the ones who are represented. But yeah, we're always glad to help connect you to one of those legal service partners if you are facing eviction, because as harsh as the law is for tenants here, as we laid out, and as difficult as it can be, the few protections that do exist, these lawyers can pick up on that if a mistake was made in the filing. And I think we had a question earlier: how do you prove retaliation when there's been a non-renewal notice? That's a wonderful question, because it's almost impossible unless something blatant has happened, unless you recently filed a complaint. But we know what happens. We see it. We know that's what's happening. And so certainly with that lawyer, that you're going to have a much better chance of proving something like that, even raising that issue in the first place at the right time. When you're in failure to pay rent court, the judge doesn't want to hear about anything else going on, but what do you owe? And so you really having an advocate to find those avenues to say, hey, this filing is faulty, we should throw this out. We've seen it happen, and we're just really pleased that program's in place. So again, it's Legal Aid, it's CASA. You can reach out to them directly or let us know, and we're glad to help connect. I think you can call 211 actually now and supposedly get into the program. But let us know if you want to get connected to someone there.
Great. And Emily, and one of the things that we've been working on that we do day to day, aside from advocating for legislation, which is unfortunately a small part of our operation, we believe so much needs to be done. But the largest part of our operation is working with individual tenants and seeking to help tenants who want to form tenants associations. Emily, you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, we're always looking and happy to help tenants who want to organize. It's our position that the time to organize isn't when the landlord's giving you problems, but actually when things are going great. To form one doesn't mean it doesn't have to be a bad thing that happened in response to like an event, an incident at the building. Could just be neighbors wanting to get together. But then be there as a resource for when issues do arise. So if anyone is interested in organizing with their neighbors but doesn't know doesn't know their neighbors, doesn't know how to get involved, you can always reach out to us. Our email, put in the chat again, info@rentersalliance.org. But what we've done with some other associations is if we meet like one interested tenant or they have like a couple of friends who are all interested, we can do like an interest meeting with open the whole building and kind of explain the benefits to forming a tenants association, the best practices for how to form one, kind of the do's and don'ts. Because it can be a little bit tricky to navigate in the beginning, trying to get everyone on the same page. So we can come to your building, we can help print flyers and distribute them to get people to come out, and then just kind of guide the group on how to get started, and making sure that they know their rights and they can pass that information on to their neighbors.
Great. And Tim Wong, you want to give a little bit about some best practices for a good tenants association?
Yeah, so pretty much keep it focused on what's going on inside your building. Don't try to do anything political or religious, and develop some bylaws that reflect that, and go from there. And if you need help coming up with best practices, we could definitely help you do that.
Yeah, the idea, unless I know that there are some people who actually live in buildings that are set up as religious buildings. That's a different story, I suppose. But generally speaking, we've found this out over our many years. The renter community is a diverse community with diverse religions, diverse politics, diverse opinions. But the one thing that we generally have in common is the stability and quality and affordability of our homes. And so that's what tenants associations are all about. We don't have to get into everybody's personal interests on any other topic except that one. And so our slogan behind us, if anybody can see behind my shoulder, is building community. So as Emily pointed out, sometimes tenants associations are sparked because of complaints, but they don't have to be. It can also be just because you want to know your neighbors. There are ways to be community active with a tenants association, welcoming new neighbors to the building, bringing in your elected officials to hear what they have to say and hold them accountable, and keep yourselves informed about what your government is doing for you, bringing in experts who talk about, how to grow great plants in your apartment building or something of interest to you, or just simply from time to time, getting together and, having a wine and cheese or whatever you want to do. So building community like a neighborhoods association is very important. We found, in places with long-standing renter communities, like in New York City or Chicago, or places that people have had apartment buildings for hundreds of years, neighborhood tenants associations are not unusual. But in places where the tenant communities are new and growing, we see a lot of isolation. We see in like a cul-de-sac where people own houses, people tend to know their neighbors and what's going on in the community. They have neighborhood watches, they have neighborhood associations. But apartment buildings tend to see a lot of isolation. And so we're trying to change that culture a little bit. We have seen in some apartment communities where they have very strong tenants associations. We attended one the other day where 100 people showed up, very active. They couldn't wait for us to stop talking so they could get to their wine and cheese. So, this is, and they have been around for a long time. So this is really, the A-level tenants association, and it doesn't have to be onerous. We recommend officers and bylaws and so on, but you can form it any which way you want. You don't have to meet all the time. You can meet once a month or once a quarter. And have officers who meet when they want to or when an issue comes up. So there's lots of ways to skin this cat, but we definitely think it's important for you to act collectively, to know your building and your neighborhood, and to have some kind of organization to share that information about one another that matters in terms of your community stability and health. So is there any other question or concern in the chat, folks, that we should address before we say goodnight? All right. Well, with that, then let me again thank you, Matt Hill from the Public Justice Center, a ally and partner, longtime ally and partner of the Renters Alliance, with whom we formed Renters United Maryland long ago. Let me also thank our staff, Melek Demir, Pat Beckham, Emily Towie, Tim Wong, and David Mullins. We are here to reach out to you and to provide assistance individually and collectively wherever we can. And of course, to Josh Fisher, the treasurer of our board, who is always paying attention to make sure we're doing what the money is supposed to do. So thank you, everybody, and good night. And we are recorded on YouTube, so you can watch again if you choose.